Well, my name's Richard Lozano. I'm Head of Employment here at Taylor Bracewell. Discrimination is derived from the Equality Act 2010. That's the place to look to when looking at discrimination within the workplace, because the Equality Act contains really important rights. Those rights are to be protected against discrimination. But for those rights to apply to you as an employee, what you have to demonstrate is that you have a protected characteristic, and as a consequence of that protected characteristic, you've then suffered discrimination. In relation to protected characteristics, those are things such as age, disability, gender reassignment, sexual orientation. So those are the things that you've got to point to, and it can be more than one. Then you need to think about what kind of claim you might have. Because it's no good saying, well, I've been discriminated against because of my age. Well, what do you mean? And what we then need to move to is the next stage in this. So, we've dealt with the protected characteristics. We need to move on to the types of claim that you can bring. The most obvious one is direct discrimination. Are you saying you've been discriminated against because of that protected characteristic? Or are you saying it's a form of, in effect, indirect discrimination? Is it as a consequence of a rule that the employer has, for example, that has an adverse effect on you? Beyond that, you might well want to complain about harassment within the workplace as something happened that violates your dignity. That would give rise to a harassment claim. You might feel as though you've been victimised. By that, when I refer to victimisation, I'm not talking about unfair treatment. I've been quite specific here. The law states that victimisation arises in circumstances where you may well have complained about your treatment and then your employer treats you unfairly as a consequence. That's an example of victimisation. And then beyond that, the Equality Act specifically addresses the issue of disability discrimination. So for example, there's a couple of claims that you might have there as a disabled person. One of them's a failure to make reasonable adjustments. So for example, if you had a disability in the workplace that was having an adverse impact on your ability to do your job, and you were struggling as a consequence, it may well be that the employer needs to make adjustments to your role so that you can then do the job that you're employed to do. There's another kind of claim you can bring as a disabled employee, and that's a so-called arising from claim. That's a phrase that's in the Equality Act, and that's where you feel as though you're being treated unfairly as a consequence of your disability. Not necessarily the disability itself, but for example, you might need medical appointments because you've got a medical condition that requires treatment at hospital. And as a result of that, your employer doesn't like the fact that you're not available for work when they want you to be available. Potentially, that could give rise to an arising from disability claim. You're in the workplace at the moment. What stage are you at in terms of what are you experiencing? Do you need to raise a grievance? If you haven't already, I'd advise you to do that. It's always sensible to try and resolve the issue within the workplace by raising a grievance. It might be that the issues are so serious that you want to look at bringing a claim in the Employment Tribunal. And I then want to talk to you about what that would involve and what the stages would be in bringing a claim, potentially. So that's another avenue that you can look at. And if we were to talk about the Employment Tribunal, I'd be talking about ACAS and ACAS early conciliation, which is something that you need to do before you bring a claim in the Employment Tribunal, and is a further opportunity to try and resolve the issues that you have, albeit more from the perspective of settling your claims as opposed to resolving the issue in the workplace as such.